Okay, hi guys, Coach Bon here. So this is my second therapy session. Okay, hopefully you don't mind all the sounds coming up. Okay, from the background. So my son's actually watching YouTube at the moment. He's awake now too as well. Right, and a few stuff I have for me as well. Right. Maybe before I go through with this, let me tell my son a little bit of something first. Okay. Zalesh, can you turn down the volume a little bit? Sayang, sayang, can you turn down the volume a little bit? Right. Okay. So today I'm just going to be talking about the Dark Night of the Soul, a concept which I've learned from Chief Pete the other day and others, right? So what I noticed about the Dark Night of the Soul is, seems that I've been going through this particular process a lot of times, again and again and again and again and again, maybe even twice in a year, right? The way it was discussed during one of the live streams that I've attended for with the chosen 144K is that it doesn't seem that it's supposed to happen too often. Okay, which begs the question: why is it happening continuously for me? All right, so perhaps before I go further with this thing, all right, sometimes I feel it's not fair for me to go through this dark night of the soul because it involves being in a very dark place, and then you're supposed to build yourself up after that, and you become better, and life's supposed to go even like great. Now the problem here is sometimes for me it feels like initially it feels like it's great. I mean here I feel like I've achieved a certain level of advancement in my situation, and then something bad happens, right? Something bad happens, which is usually just a few months, and I'm back where I started, right? I'm back where I started with, which is the dark night of the soul, right? So for people who are not, for those who not understand what dark night of the soul is, it's basically where it happens in stages. It's a process where you break down and then you get built right up. Okay, so from my understanding, it has 5 stages. Okay, the first stage involves you getting triggered into that whole process in the first place. Okay, due to some emotional situation or due to some great change in your life. Okay, due to some emotional outbursts. And then you go through a process where you self-reflect, go into a hermit mode. I mean, that's the word they use for the second stage. Somewhat, I think, somewhat apt. Where you go into a hermit mode, you don't have anyone that you don't want to be in contact with anyone and anything. Okay, so which is a horrible feeling for a narcissist. It's a particularly horrible feeling because there's no fuel. So during this time, I usually kind of fuel myself, right? Kind of fuel myself, right? Through a lot of different ways. Through a lot of different ways. Chiefly, number one would be through trying to connect with the higher power. That's usually one of the strategies I try to use, which don't usually work enough. Okay, so my second strategy would usually be trying to keep myself preoccupied with video games and the like, right? Just to get a reaction for my own self, right? So anyway, the third stage is supposed to when you start reconstructing yourself, go face to face with your shadow self. Okay, in this case, eventually I managed to discover that actually, if not diagnosed as a narcissistic, someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, but definitely as close as you can be without being diagnosed by an expert. Okay, uh, why you ask? It's because of my relationship with my wife. Okay, so I recognize now it's in a pretty abusive relationship, right? And it's usually one way. Okay, one way. Usually it's from me. Okay, of course I feel like I'm being abused abused by my wife as well. But when you look at the actual dynamics of the whole communication, the abuse is actually one way, right? One way. It was from me to her, right? So now I'm not saying this to feel regret or anything, right? It's more like I can't function I can't function as well if I'm not functional with my own wife. Okay? Because my wife is my primary source, the one that gives me strength, the one that gives me fuel. Now, if I can't work properly with someone that is so important in my life, how am I to work properly in the capacity that I'm supposed to? And then the fourth and fifth stage is apparently when I'm supposed to find purpose with my life. Okay, that's when I'm supposed to find some kind of purpose with my life, which I've never reached. Unless you think gathering fuel, gathering validation, all this kind of stuff, doing what I usually do, is a form of what do you call this? It's a form of purpose. I mean, it could be, right? Could be. Now, if I watch some videos from diagnosed NPDs as well, okay, from at the moment it used to be H.D. Tudor and Sam Vaknin, but now I'm listening to more lay or less powerful. I don't know what the word to use. Less powerful versions of narcissist aware. I suppose aware narcissist. A bit more, what do you call this, relatable even to myself. So the people that I'm looking at are Lee Hammock and also what do you call this, Brian Scott, I think his name. Okay. So anyway, they seem to imply there's a possibility of changing your true nature. Okay. Now, if I heard about this a few years back, I probably would say, okay, I would probably agree with them. Okay. But after going through this dark night of the soul process again and again and again, I have a feeling it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon, unless because these two people that don't seem like they go through the process that I went through. Okay, so like before going forward, right? By all intents and purposes, if you see my life, it's very stable. Okay, it's very stable. Meaning here there's no cause for the problems that I'm suffering at the moment. There's no cause for it. Even during my childhood years, I think I mentioned in a recent video, even though I wasn't in a typical abusive situation, but due to my genetic conditions, okay, it gave rise to the situation where I have this condition, right? Which is kind of tough. Hey, hi Chief. Thank you for dropping by. All right. Okay. So now, if there's a possibility of me healing myself, it doesn't seem that's going to happen anytime soon, right? I think it's going to require constant this dark night of the soul thing, right? It's going to require that constant thing, all right? Now, from a outsider's point of view, I seem to get better from an outsider's point of view, but from myself, because I compare my improvement with my relationship with my wife. Okay, that is actually the number one thing that I'm trying to do every time I try to improve my condition. Okay, so accepting the fact that this self-defense mechanism that I have is going to take a long time to fix, if it's fixable even. All right, long time to fix. I've chosen to use the strategy of trying to one, mental alchemy. Okay, meaning here trying to shift certain information that I used to what's the word? Conceptualize or maybe give meaning to as a certain way. Okay, for example, my wife's facial expressions. So somehow I'm confused by my wife's facial expression, right? So for those of you who knows about people with narcissism, we are very good at cold alchemy. Okay, meaning here we tend to have this ability to really look at people's uh, non-verbal communication. That is what we really try to look at. Now I'm confused by my wife's facial expression. Okay, so certain expression that he has seems to convey to me anyway that she's not listening to me, for example, or for she's giving me disrespect. When in fact it's totally that's not the reaction at all. Now, if in other people using those facial expression, it does convey that meaning. But for my wife in particular, it is totally different. All right. So one of the strategies I do is try to accept the fact that my wife has certain uh, ways of communication that is totally different than what other people usually do. Okay, but it takes a slow process. For example, it takes a slow process. Now, the easiest way for me to do so is just to ask her. I mean, are you actually saying this? Okay, before this, kind of would just like blow up. I would just blow up and you do the whole narcissist thing, and stop devaluing people, silent treatment, this and that, all kind of stuff. Only happens to my wife, by the way. Other people don't really get that kind of reaction from me. Right? But eventually, it's starting to become more and less pronounced, less and less pronounced. Okay, so the communication has improved. Okay, as I go through this process of Dark Night of the Soul, right? So thanks to everyone who actually gave me a thumbs up for this therapy session. Now, the Dark Night of the Soul is pretty interesting to me, so I want to explain to it from a narcissist point of view. Okay, now I don't think it's typical for narcissists to go through this process. I do not think it's something that we would subject ourselves to normally. But somehow, due to my conditions, I go through the process again and again. Okay, here's what I mean. Now, usually, when I go through a Dark Night of the Soul, it requires a huge amount of narcissistic injury, a massive narcissistic injury. It's so massive that I don't really want to, that I have to withdraw for a while. I mean, the pain is so intense. If you guys listen to earlier videos of myself, a narcissistic injury to me feels like knife wounds, like literal knife wounds. I can feel it deep in my soul. It's difficult for me to explain, but it really feels like deep in my soul. So a huge narcissistic injury would feel this way to me. Okay, like someone has severed my spine or something. So I become numb. Right, I become numb. And then if you look at recent videos of myself earlier last year, you can see I act like a weirdo for a while. Okay, like I'm really sick. Okay, which I was. In any case, having just a moment. Yeah, what's up? You want to say something here?
Petrol Twin Towers will be no more in 2025 is because it will be smaller than compared to that.
Yeah. Right. I have to do a video first. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Go with it. It's a YouTube video. You want to say something? Say something. Say something.
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anyway, yeah, the narcissistic rage. So it's like unbelievably painful. Now, this is the usual strategy that I have observed from other narcissists. Okay. I mean, even I can do it. It's just I don't do it. I would quickly try to discard. Okay. So if you've seen my earlier FB post, Chief, I was really trying to do that. I was really trying to discard my wife, so devalue her and all this kind of stuff. So I went through a really horrible phase the whole time. All right, but I wasn't able to. Okay, so interestingly, and the reason why I wasn't able to is because of Eastern family values. You're not supposed to break up if you have a child. So pressure from her family and my family, so it stopped us from doing so. Now, in a usual situation, as soon as I'm able to discard, I will, immediately feel with another person, all right, and totally avoid going through this whole phase where I have to. Hi, Luis Gunner, thanks for coming. All right, so I would totally avoid going through the whole process of the dark night of the soul. I would immediately fueled up and back to stage, back to whatever stage, zero stage. Gets for that. But due to my conditions, I wasn't able to feel. All right, I wasn't able to feel, and this process keep happening. All right. Now, since I'm unable to feel with a different partner, all right, what happens is I start going down and down and down into the second phase, the hermit stage. Okay, there will be this very erratic stage where I try to feel everywhere with my friends and everything, and I will try to do all kinds of weird stuff, basically to feel. And then once that's failed, eventually, when I reach second stage, I totally disappear. So you guys might notice no Facebook messages, no Instagram posts, no WhatsApp talks or whatever. That is basically me going through the dark night of the soul. Okay, so that's the second stage. I think the hermit stage. Now, from what I hear from other people, when you reach the second stage, when you were at second stage, you're supposed to be comfortable, right? Yeah, I do. I isolate. Okay, but I also isolate in a specific way with his Ghana, right? So I get isolated in my parents' place, and it's more like once I reach a certain stage of such a low fuel, I immediately will isolate because without the self defense mechanism, without my narcissism, then I start thinking about all the crazy stuff I did. So it's like continuous narcissistic injury, continuous narcissistic injury without the defense mechanism. So it's painful, man. So it's really painful. Uh, uh, Having said that, the isolation phase sucks. Maybe so. But the second stage of the hermit stage is literal suckiness. It feels like constant narcissistic injury, full on, like such pain. I feel such pain that I do not want to cause myself anymore. I mean, that's the real reason why I don't want to meet anyone, because the pain of the narcissistic injury is constant. It's constant. I mean, why would I want to add some more pain to it, right? So during this stage, I'll just hide. So this is the worst thing about it. This is the worst thing about it. It's this particular time it was I've been like 8 or 7 months, which is like the longest I ever been through. It was the longest that I've been through. It was so freaking painful. Okay. Uh, but during that time, I do receive some narcissistic fuel supply, and it was from Shaz. Okay. So the only person I contacted was her. So during that whole situation, we were in contact through messages. Okay, anyone else we didn't. Okay, she didn't do the no contact regime, obviously. Okay, so instead of me hoovering her, she was hoovering me. Okay, but I think in her exactly, it's painful. Okay, it's painful. Okay? It's weird. It's weird. So I think for most of you, during the hermit phase is something of relief, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's like when you sit down and you feel like everything's going off. But me, no, that phase is like constant pain for me. Okay, so I don't usually dwell on it too long. All right, so usually when the third stage comes, it's usually when I start meeting my wife. Okay, that's when I start going to the third stage. Now the third stage, from what I listened to from Dave yesterday, is when you get in contact with your dark side. So this is actually the time when I started realizing that my dark side is actually predictable. Okay, it's a lot more predictable. Meaning here, I used to think that I could change it. Because it's very predictable. Like every time I feel disrespected, or I feel disrespected, I will act in a certain way. I will have this rage, and if it's something that I feel I cannot solve through violence, I will try to. Then I'll feel fear, this immense fear, and I'll try to run away. Okay, try to run away. Right. So before I go further, I actually want to give thanks to Chief Pete and Luis Garner. You guys are actually helping me out a lot here. All right. And also, I want to say, Chief, that I really appreciate you and Luis Garner for supporting me through this whole situation as well. Okay, by giving me the fuel. All right. And don't worry about the small narcissistic injury that you want to cause me some. I'm a big dude. All right, I'm a big dude. The only one who can truly hurt me is actually my wife, Shaz. All right, but she's really she knows how to handle me, basically. All right, she knows how to handle me. She's the best at it. All right, now going further in, usually what happens is I would actually get better on the Thursday. I will get better at using my abilities. Okay. I think Luis Garner asked me before how I got better. I think this is how I got better actually. It's because I start realizing this defense mechanism that I have is unchangeable. It's unchangeable. Okay, if it's changeable, it's very difficult to do so, and I don't think anyone can do so. So realizing that this particular thing exists in every other person, all right, by able to self that part of me, well, technically you can manipulate other people, because you're gonna act in a certain way, okay, if you know them well enough. Why? Because they have what I have. And I've been trying to wrestle with this thing that I have all my life. Well, these people probably not never even thought about it. So if you want to think of it as me getting better at doing what I do, it's probably connected to that, right? So it's actually either danger or good, right? So I do realize this recent dark night of the soul. I also realized the second thing, right? That I probably have certain levels of psychopathy, meaning here I will try to control everything around me, like really control everything around me. Okay, this is due to the fact that I think I mentioned before the emotions that people like me feel. Well, and I suspect is an immense level of fear, an immense level of rage. Okay, so it's from the fear part that I try to control everything. Okay, meaning here I try to make everyone do what they're supposed to do in my environment as safe as possible. Right, I don't really like to go into situations where I'm not in control. Okay, so probably in that regard, I have some psychopathic tendencies. Okay, so this extends as well to my wife as well, eventually, which is actually the second stage of my problem with her. Okay, the communication part has improved greatly, meaning here we fight less. But now due to the psychopathic part, even when we do fight, it's explosive. It's explosive because there's no way my wife's going to allow me to control her, for example. Right? So she's doing a good job of keeping it in check, to be honest with you. All right. Anyway, now we come to the important part of the situation which I can't wrap myself into. So I actually tried to ask this question to Dave the other day, but probably I'll DM him later. It feels like I stopped at stage 3 and I get sent to stage 1 again and again. So I believe it happened in my university days. Okay, university days, because that is the time when I started having relationships. Before this, I didn't have any relationship. I only have friends. I never been in a relationship with a woman. So it started manifesting when I actually had relationship with women. Okay, in a sense where I tried to control them, when I start doing abusive things, which I've never done to people, to my friends. Perhaps I did, but my friends are usually guys, so maybe they were affected differently. Fight for fuel. I do fight for fuel if I'm in desperate need. But if not, then I'm a bit more systematic in my situation and in how I gather them. Okay, so my fuel matrix is quite wide. Uh, So it's easy for me to pick and choose who I want to fuel at any given time. Okay, but here's the capper. Here's the capper. Uh, the one who chooses who I can fuel with is actually Coach Shaz. Okay, for a lot of different reasons. Okay, for a lot of different reasons. Okay, we have negotiated a situation where she agrees to be my main fuel source. Okay, I don't know if you can imagine that. So she agrees to be my main fuel source. In return, uh, I I'm more careful in how I gather fuel, because if I start gathering fuel, if it's too much, it will cause me to react in a very grandiose way, so to speak. So probably my bipolarism is due to my narcissistic tendency. I have no idea. I don't know whether it's side by side or one is causing the other. So I have no idea. Okay, like I said, we don't have a proper therapist here in Malaysia. Now, having said that, I keep feeling that I'm going back to square one. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't seem that I have a purpose. That's the problem with what I'm doing. If let's say you ask me at this moment in time, what is my purpose? I just want to be okay. Since with all my knowledge at the moment, I'm thinking I just follow where my tendency will lead me. Okay, so at the moment it's leading me towards becoming as rich and as successful as I can, which is which is which which is actually which sounds like a poor reason, but at the moment that's what I feel, because that's where my skill seems to be very useful in using. All right. So I mentioned earlier as well that me and my wife do work in a very yeah. I think you can call it uh, cooperative dysfunction. All right, because it's certainly not easy. It's certainly not easy. All right. So usually how it works is, I think I mentioned this before. She provides the substance. She provides the substance because people really react to her in a very visceral and sincere way. Okay. So, but my wife is far from being manipulative. It's far from being that. Okay. She's good at detecting manipulations. In this case, mine, but she's far from being. She's not going to take it. Okay. So I do that work for her. I mean, I'm going to do it anyway, right? I'm going to do it anyway. So rather than let me do it like in a weird way, so she just lets me do it. Okay, and I use her as the crux of my well, so-called manipulation, you might say. So we always go into any situation together. Okay, like for negotiations, for example, talking to people, for example, it's always together. All right. I think she mentioned before that it's kind of like it's like uh, she's like the contraceptive. Okay, the fuel contraceptive for me to make sure I don't go all out. Must take a toll. It does. It does. But the toll is from her. She's the one supplying the fuel. And she requires a certain amount of rest from me, because I'm very relentless. As long as you keep supplying me fuel and fuel and fuel, I'm relentless at my work. Yeah, I keep working and working and working. I never stop. So it takes a toll on her in terms of her energy. Yeah, I like to think so. So Luis Garner says whether we balance each other out. I like to think so. All right, because like personally for me, I don't really have a concrete reason why I do things. It's mostly to, at the moment, like I say, it's mostly to get as many people as possible to validate me. Where she has a certain, I guess she does have her certain things that she wants to do. All right, like, or you can ask her if she comes on. If she comes on, you can ask her what she feels like she has to do. But it's totally different for me. Okay, it's totally different for me. All right. Obviously, she feels like she can change the world. She's pretty justice minded to a pretty grandiose scale. So probably she has a little bit of narcissism in herself as well. Yeah, she cops it more, but she's in control. She controls everything, finances, this and that. Uh, Now, can I self-validate, work that muscle? Yeah, to a certain extent, but it takes more energy. I think I mentioned this before. It takes more energy than it supplies. Okay, it takes more energy than it supplies. But I can use it in certain cases. Like for example, like right now, when I was starting the video, right, no one was on. So at least for that first 5 minutes, I can function pretty well because usually my mind will be okay. No one's here. This is bullshit. Why should I do it? But I'm able to at least use that muscle to make me go through it by telling myself there's something that'll help me out in the long run. Anyway, session was only for 30 minutes. Okay, so thank you guys. Like seriously, I really appreciate it. Luis Garner and Chief Pete and whoever came here and gave me a like. Okay, it's really helping me out in my therapies. Okay, so hopefully I'll be as helpful for the tribe as the tribe has been helpful for me. All right, see you guys next video.